Hello, friends. I am sitting here in the soft, flickering glow of a single kerosene lamp, and for the first time in my 66 years, the very air around me finally feels like it truly belongs to my soul. Before we dive deep into this journey of survival and reclaiming my own life, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and join our growing community of resilient souls. Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own country, watching the walls close in fast? I spent 4 long decades marching to a rhythmic beat that someone else drummed out on a cold desk in a distant city I have never even visited. You grow up thinking that is just how the clock is supposed to tick, but then you suddenly wake up and realize the gears are rusted shut. My name is Arthur, a man the government census calls a veteran, but the local bank only views as a growing liability on a digital spreadsheet that counts every cent I own and owe. The suburban silence used to feel like peace to me, but lately it started sounding more like a slow, terrifying countdown to my own erasure. I looked at these hands, calloused from years of military service and honest labor, and then I looked at the digital numbers on my monthly bank statement. Those numbers seemed to evaporate every single time the sun rose, leaving me with nothing but cold anxiety and a sense of betrayal by the system that promised to protect all of us for lifelong. They tell you that if you play by the rules, the safety net will catch you, but they never mention the holes are wide enough to swallow a man whole. My fixed veteran income became a cruel joke that nobody was laughing at, especially not the grocery clerk watching me put back the decent coffee for the store brand dust. It wasn't just about the money, it was the stripping away of my dignity by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts and rising costs of living every single day of the year. I remember standing in my own driveway, looking at the manicured lawns of neighbors I barely knew, feeling like an absolute intruder in a world I helped build and protect. The system doesn't see a human being when they look at me. They see a data point that isn't producing enough tax revenue anymore. I felt like an outcast, a relic of an era where a man's word meant something. How can this be called freedom when the walls are closing in and basic existence costs more every month? Now I had to make a choice before the cycle broke me completely. This isn't just a story about numbers, it is about the desperate leap I took for survival when the walls of my rented life started closing in. I decided to stop waiting for a rescue that was never coming from the government or the banks. In the next video diary, I will show you the moment I decided to finally sell it all and search for the land that will save my very soul and sanity. Well, it happened that the walls didn't just crumble. They started leaning in with a heavy bureaucratic weight that I could feel in my very bones every single morning. I had spent my entire life following every line, paying every fee, and keeping my head down like a good soldier should. But suddenly, the rules of the game changed without anyone bothering to tell the players who were actually on the field. How is this supposed to be freedom? It was a cold, calculated trap. I watched the prices at the local market climb like a fever that just wouldn't break, no matter how much I tried to tighten my belt. Every time I stepped into that store, I felt a sharp pang of absolute humiliation as I calculated the cost of basic eggs and bread against my dwindling veteran's check. How can they call this progress when the cost of living outpaces our very breath? It felt like the system was actively punishing me for growing old. Then came the property tax reassessment, a cold, printed notice that arrived in my mailbox like a declaration of war against my very survival. They wanted a larger piece of the home I had already bled for over 4 long decades of honest, back-breaking labor. How can a man ever truly own anything when the government can simply decide to raise the rent on his own land whenever they feel a little bit greedy? It is a slow, methodical theft of dignity. I thought about growing a simple garden to offset the costs, but the local zoning laws in this town are designed to keep us dependent. They told me my front yard was for aesthetic enjoyment, not for the practical survival of a hungry man who served his country. These regulations aren't about safety or community. They are the invisible bars of a cage that ensures we keep buying what they are selling. What happened to the right of a man to provide for himself? I started feeling like an absolute outcast in the very neighborhood where I had raised my children and buried my loyal dogs. The younger families looked at me with a mix of pity and annoyance, as if my aging presence was somehow lowering their precious property values. I followed every single rule they laid out for me, yet here I was, feeling like a complete failure in a world that no longer recognized my worth. Is this the reward for a lifetime of hard service? The system isn't broken. It is functioning exactly as it was designed, to extract every last drop of blood from the people at the bottom. I saw the corporate towers rising in the city, while the bridges in my own backyard were literally rusting into the river. Where did all the money go? And why does it never come back to the people who built this country? It never reaches the veteran wondering if he can afford his heart medication or heating bill. There is a specific, hollow kind of loneliness that comes with realizing the social contract you signed has been shredded by the other party. I sat in my quiet living room, the silence punctuated only by the hum of an electric meter that seemed to spin faster with every passing second. I was a ghost in a machine that only valued my output, and now that my output had slowed, the machine was ready to discard me like scrap metal. Why do we stay? Now, I tried to call the local offices to ask for a bit of leniency, but I was met with a wall of automated voices. You press 1 for English, and then you wait for an eternity just to be told that the computer doesn't allow for human exceptions. It is a faceless, nameless antagonist that eats your time and your spirit while offering nothing but a dial tone in return. How did we allow ourselves to become so disconnected from our own basic humanity? I look at my hands, still strong and capable of building something real, and then I look at the digital world that seems to despise physical reality. Everything is a subscription now, a temporary permission to exist in a space that you can never truly call your own. We are a nation of tenants, paying for the privilege of breathing air that is increasingly polluted by greed and systemic indifference. Well, I decided that I had finally had enough of their hollow promises. They want you to believe that if you are struggling, it is your own fault, a personal failure of character or planning. But how can you plan for a system that moves the goalposts every time you get close to the finish line? I refuse to accept the shame they try to heap on the elderly and the vulnerable who are just trying to survive. The failure isn't mine. It belongs to the institutions that abandoned their duty to the people they supposedly serve. My savings, which I thought would be a comfortable cushion for my golden years, turned into a handful of sand leaking through my fingers. The interest rates they offered were a joke, while the interest they charged for basic survival was a predatory noose around my neck. I felt the claustrophobia of debt and rising costs closing in on me like a rising tide in a locked room. What kind of future is this for a man who did everything right? Every form I filled out felt like a trap, a way for them to find a reason to deny me the benefits I had earned through years of sacrifice. They want you to give up, to stop fighting for what is yours, because it is cheaper for the system if you just quietly fade away into the background. But they forgot one very important thing about men like me. We don't know how to quit when the situation gets dire and the odds are down. I drove through the downtown area and saw the shiny windows of the banks that held my life in their digital ledgers. They don't see Arthur, the veteran. They see a risk factor, a declining asset that needs to be liquidated or managed for maximum profit. The humanity has been stripped out of the economy, replaced by algorithms that don't care if you have a roof over your head or a warm meal in your belly. It is a very cold world. Then there's the public space, where even the way the streets are laid out feels like a method of control, keeping us moving in predictable patterns. You can't even sit on a bench in some places without being treated like a potential criminal or a vagrant. The public spaces have been privatized or regulated into oblivion, leaving us with nowhere to just be human without a transaction. Why does every single interaction in this modern world have to carry a price tag? I spent nights staring at the ceiling, mapping out the ways the system tracks us through our phones, our cards, and our very habits. It is a total surveillance state, dressed up in the colourful rags of consumer choice and false freedom. They know what you buy, where you go, and who you talk to, all while telling you that you are the master of your own fate. Well, I was beginning to see through the thin plastic veil. I could see the same look in the eyes of the other guys at the VFW, a shared understanding that the world we fought for had been sold to the highest bidder. We are relics in our own time, watching the values of loyalty and hard work being replaced by the cult of the immediate and the superficial. It was a silent betrayal that tasted like copper in the back of my throat. We were being erased from our own story. The weight of it all was starting to bow my shoulders, making me feel older than my 66 years ever should have felt. I could sense the desperation in the streets, the hidden panic of a population that knows something is wrong, but lacks the tools or the courage to name it. I was a casualty of a war I didn't know was being fought, a veteran of a civilizational collapse happening in slow motion right before our very eyes. I started noticing the cracks in the infrastructure, the literal and metaphorical potholes that no one bothered to fix anymore because the money was being funneled elsewhere. The schools were failing, the bridges were rusting, and the sense of community had been replaced by a digital simulation of connection that left everyone feeling more isolated than ever. It was a systemic rot that went all the way to the marrow, and I was just another cell being consumed. I watched the news and saw the world tearing itself apart over things that didn't matter, while the real foundations of life were being neglected and destroyed. The political theatre, the cultural wars, the endless noise, it was all just a distraction to keep the sheep from noticing the wolves were already in the fold. I decided to turn off the television and listen to the silence, finding more truth in the stillness than in 1,000 hours of expert commentary. Now the claustrophobia of this life was becoming unbearable, a tightening knot in my chest that told me I had to move before I suffocated completely. I felt like a prisoner who had finally found the loose stone in the wall of his cell, and I was ready to start digging. In the next video, I will share the exact moment I decided to sell everything and make my run for the hills. Stay strong. Until next time, everyone, let's rise together. It happened at 3 in the morning, staring at a final notice for a tax reassessment that felt like a death sentence for my dignity. I sat there in the silence of a house that was technically mine, but felt like a high-priced cage owned by the county. The numbers didn't add up anymore, and the weight in my chest finally snapped into a strange, cold clarity. I realized that waiting for things to get better was just a slow way of dying inside. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and cleared every single bureaucratic paper off the table with one heavy, tired sweep of my arm. That was the exact moment I decided to stop playing their rigged game entirely, because the rules were designed to make me lose. I am done being a data point for a bank that treats my service like an expired coupon. If the system wants to discard me, then I will simply remove myself from its reach first. The decision felt like a physical surge of electricity through my old bones, replacing the hollow exhaustion with a sharp tactical focus I hadn't felt in decades. I am going to sell this house, liquidate every piece of useless clutter I own, and take my remaining life back into my own hands. I don't need their permission to breathe or their approval to exist. This suburban life is a sinking ship, and I am finally climbing into the lifeboat to head for land. Of course, there is a deep, primal fear in walking away from everything I thought was secure. But that fear is nothing compared to the relief. For the first time in years, I can actually see a future that isn't just a series of rising bills and declining health. I am reclaiming my agency from the teeth of a machine that only values what it can extract. It is time to trade this plastic convenience for the raw, honest struggle of true autonomy. This is my tactical retreat to a position I can actually defend with my own two hands and a clear, focused mind. I am not running away. I am advancing toward a life where my worth is measured by the wood I split and the water I draw. The system failed its part of the bargain, so I am officially tearing up the contract and walking out the door. My journey into the wild begins now, and I won't ever look back again. In the next part of this diary, I will show you how I began the search for the specific patch of dirt that will save me. It is a daunting task, but the fire in my soul is burning brighter than any kerosene lamp could ever manage. Please share your thoughts in the comments below about your own moments of clarity. Stay strong and keep moving forward. Until next time, everyone, let's rise together as we find our path to freedom. The first real step was the most brutal. Standing in my driveway with 40 years of my life spread out on folding tables for strangers to pick through for nickels and dimes. It is a strange, gut-wrenching feeling to watch people haggle over the tools you used to build your children's cribs or the furniture that held your family together during the hard winters. But every item sold felt like a heavy link of a rusted chain finally snapping off my tired old shoulders. I took that pile of cash and the equity from the house sale and walked straight past the investment bankers who wanted to manage my portfolio for a fee. I didn't need a digital ledger. I needed a heavy-duty diesel truck and a used, rugged travel trailer that could handle the washboard roads of the high desert. Finding the right rig was a grueling process of inspecting rusted frames and leaking seals in back lots. But I finally found a sturdy beast that didn't rely on too many fancy computers. Now don't go thinking this was some colourful cinematic montage where everything just clicks into place with a catchy soundtrack playing in the background. My back was screaming every single night from loading the essential tools, the solar batteries, and the emergency rations into every available inch of that cramped metallic space. Freedom has a very specific, heavy scent of grease, diesel fumes, and the metallic tang of old sweat that lingers in the air. How can we call ourselves men if we fear the physical cost of our own basic survival? The morning I finally pulled out of that suburban cul-de-sac for the last time, the sun was just beginning to bleed over the horizon in a hazy industrial orange. I didn't feel the sudden rush of joy I expected, but rather a cold, focused determination that sat heavy in my gut like a stone. I spent the first few nights sleeping in noisy rest areas and dusty truck stops, realizing very quickly that this new life was going to be an endless series of difficult, unglamorous problems to solve. I spent weeks poring over topographical maps and county tax records in small-town libraries, looking for that one specific patch of dirt that the system had forgotten to over-regulate. It is an exhausting game of cat and mouse, with zoning boards and local inspectors who want to ensure you stay tethered to their expensive, crumbling grids. I drove thousands of lonely miles down forgotten logging roads, pushing my truck to its absolute limit, while praying the transmission wouldn't decide to give up the ghost in the middle of nowhere. Well, the first real breakdown happened on a steep mountain pass, with steam billowing from under the hood, and my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I spent 6 hours on my back in the freezing mud, wrestling with a burst coolant hose, while the wind whipped through the pines with a mocking whistle. There was no roadside assistance to call, and no neighbor to lean on for a quick hand. This is the reality of autonomy. When something breaks, you are the only mechanic on the entire planet. Every day is a constant negotiation with your own physical limitations and the unforgiving laws of physics that govern the natural world around us. I've had to learn how to fix solar controllers in the dark and how to stretch a single gallon of water across 3 days of hard labor. It is exhausting, dirty, and often quite terrifying when the shadows grow long and you are miles from the nearest paved road. But even with the dirt under my fingernails, I have never felt more capable or truly relevant. So, I kept pushing further into the periphery, leaving the digital surveillance and the rising taxes behind in a cloud of thick, red dust. The search for the land wasn't just about finding a place to park. It was about finding a place where the soil could actually sustain a man's life. Please tell me in the comments if you have ever felt this urge to just drive until the pavement ends. In the next video, I will show the clearing I found. Until next time, everyone, let's rise together. I finally killed the engine, and the silence that rushed into the cabin was unlike anything I have ever heard in my 6 decades of living. Before we continue this reflection on true autonomy, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and join our community of fighters. I stepped out of the truck, and the air here is thin, sharp, and smells purely of ancient pine and sun-baked granite. My boots crunched on soil that doesn't belong to a bank or a zoning board anymore. I walked to the edge of the ridge, looking down at the rugged valley where no streetlights will ever blur the stars again. Back in the suburbs, the ground always felt like a temporary stage I was paying too much to stand on every single day. Here, the dirt under my fingernails is a testament to my own survival, not a debt to a faceless bureaucracy that stopped caring. Can you feel the difference between being a tenant and being a man who truly stands alone? Just an hour ago, I was wrestling with a heavy, rusted jack on a steep incline, while a sudden mountain storm threatened to wash me away entirely. My hands were shaking, and my lungs burned from the thin altitude, but as the final lug nut tightened, a strange peace washed over me. In the city, a breakdown meant a frantic call for help and a bill I couldn't afford. Out here, it is a direct conversation between my own will and the raw physics. That feeling of being a discarded relic, a veteran the system wanted to quietly erase, evaporated the moment I stood up and wiped the grease away. The exhaustion is deep, but it doesn't carry the hollow sting of defeat or the crushing weight of systemic betrayal anymore. This is the liberty they promised us in the brochures, but never actually delivered because they were too busy counting our taxes. I am no longer a data point. I am a solid, breathing force of nature now. I look at the horizon and see a future where I finally hold the pen to my own story, regardless of what the failing economy decides. What is stopping you from reclaiming your own agency and stepping away from the static noise that drowns out your human soul? It is a hard road, but the dignity found in the struggle is worth every drop of sweat we shed today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about your search. Until next time, everyone, let's rise together. I've learned that true security isn't found in a digital bank account or a government promise that can be retracted at any moment by a faceless bureaucrat. It lives in the calloused skin of my own palms and the steady, honest rhythm of the seasons that don't care about inflation or rising tax rates. The system wants us to believe we are fragile and dependent, but that is a lie designed to keep us paying for our own cages. Real safety is knowing how to build, fix, and grow. This journey of mine started as a desperate flight for survival, but it has transformed into a profound realization that I am not actually alone in this struggle. Across this great country, there are thousands of you watching these flickering shadows, feeling that same cold knot of systemic betrayal tightening in your own chests. We are a growing tribe of the resilient, people who have decided that our dignity is worth more than the hollow convenience the modern world tries to sell us every day. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments below, because your voices are the fuel that keeps this fire of independence burning bright. Tell me about the moment you realized the social contract was broken, or the specific steps you are taking to reclaim your own agency from the machine. We need to exchange our knowledge, our failures, and our small victories to build a foundation that no algorithm can ever touch. Your stories are the maps for those who are still trapped in the concrete grid. We aren't just surviving out here in the periphery. We are pioneering a way of existing that honors the human spirit over corporate profit margins. This isn't just about off-grid cabins or solar panels. It is a fundamental reclamation of the soul from a world that tried to turn us into mere data points. Every time one of us stands tall and says no more, the bars of that invisible prison get a little weaker for everyone else on the outside. We are the architects of our own freedom. The sun is finally dipping below the jagged mountain horizon, and the air is getting cold, but my heart has never felt warmer or more certain. We are the masters of our own fate, and the time to stand together is right now, before the opportunity to choose our path vanishes forever into the digital static. Keep your eyes sharp and your resolve even sharper as we navigate this new landscape of autonomy and hope. Until next time, everyone, let's rise together.